Wow, what an amazing vision. I wish you could see what this place looks like. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. For those of you who have not heard me before, this accent is for real. I say that because I joked recently during a speech that I was really born in Fresno, California, and I had cultivated this accent to give myself an air of being an ethnic minority, which is very popular everywhere except in Arizona. And I received 27 letters and emails from people asking me, how exactly did you go about changing your accent? And 2 of them were from Fresno. The truth is that, this accent has been a little bit the bane of my existence while I was growing up in Greece and going to school in England, until I met Henry Kissinger when I moved to New York in 1980. And he said to me, don't worry about your accent. You can never underestimate the advantages in American public life of complete and total incomprehensibility. Of course, my ex-husband had a different explanation why I still have such a strong accent, even though I lived outside Greece longer than I've lived in Greece. He used to say that it's because I never listen. If anybody here has an ex-husband, you understand that makes sense, right? I was delighted to meet Ellen backstage and hear more about her incredible career at the Globe. What an amazing group of women here. And I want to divide what I'm going to say today into 3 parts. The personal, the professional, and then how do we combine the personal and the professional to sort of change the world and make it better for everyone. So starting with the personal, as I get older, I become increasingly interested in how we can bring all our talents and all our gifts to bear to what we're doing in the world with less stress. In fact, at the Huffington Post, we've taken all our 13 lifestyle sections, from travel to weddings to divorce. Yes, we have a divorce section. It was the lifestyle of Nora Ephron, actually, who said to me one morning, you know what, marriage comes and goes, but divorce is forever. So the theme of all this section is how can you do all these things with less stress? So as I look at our work, I realize that our personal lives, our inner core, are absolutely critical to how to achieve that. I was very lucky to have a mother who, from a very early age, made me believe that failure is not the opposite of success, but a stepping stone to success. So that meant that I was not afraid of failing, and I have failed many, many times. I have 2 daughters, and they tell me that they are tired of hearing me talk about my failures, because I think very often when you succeed, people forget about all the times you failed along the way. And I remember, for example, when I wrote my 2nd book, Living in London, it was rejected by 27 publishers, by which time I had run out of money, and I was beginning to doubt whether I had picked the right career. And I remember walking down St. James's Street in London and seeing a Barclays Bank, and going into Barclays Bank armed with absolutely nothing except a lot of Greek chutzpah, and asking to see the bank manager and asking for a loan. And for some reason, he gave it to me. And that really changed everything, because it made it possible for me to keep everything together for another 13 rejections until somebody finally published my book and set me on this writing career path. So that incident with the bank manager makes me feel that we are all living in our own fairy tale. You know how in fairy tales you have these animals, these helpful animals that come out of nowhere to help the hero and the heroine walk through a dark forest and out into safety? Well, the bank manager was really, in a way, a helpful animal disguised as a bank manager. And in all our lives, if you think of it, there are helpful animals that help us along the way. in different strange positions. What is important is for us to trust that and to actually move more and more into recognizing that every day in every life consists of things that are going well and things that are going badly. And how we feel about every day depends on what we focus on. Very often, we just waste an enormous amount of energy in negative fantasies. You know, Montaigne, the French writer, wrote, "There were many terrible things in my life, but most of them never happened." So just think of all the things that we fantasize are going to go wrong. I know we all have our kind of weak points. My weak point revolves around my daughters. Like if one of them is a junior in college, the other has just graduated, but it doesn't matter. They might as well be 3-year-olds. And let's say one of them is staying at home and is late for half an hour from when she said she would be back. Immediately my mind moves into the worst negative fantasies. And I'm working to deal with this, because I realize what an incredible drain it is in energy and what an incredible failure of imagination, really, since this is the theme of the conference, to imagine. If we have the power to imagine whatever we want, why not imagine the best? Why not create our own fantasies, since after all we are in charge of them? That's one thing we're definitely in charge of. I remember also, as we look at our own personal lives, how often what happens in our own relationships affects us so profoundly that it affects our careers, it affects everything. In my case, the big decision was after I had fallen in love with this man, whom I had fallen in love with before I'd met him. I don't know if that ever happened to you, but I'd fallen in love with him from his writings. He was this fabulous English writer who had a column in the London Times, and I used to cut his columns and underline everything and learn them by heart. And then I met him, and he invited me to dinner, and I spent the 2 weeks between the invitation and the dinner prepping for dinner. Have you ever prepped for dinner? I don't mean beauty parlors or anything. I mean, I read everything he was writing about, Northern Ireland, the Soviet Union. I wanted to be completely prepared. Of course, he couldn't care less about any of these things. He was, just to give you a mental picture, he was twice my age and half my size. But love is blind. And we were together for 7 years, at the end of which I was 30, and I really wanted to have children. And he just wanted to have cats. So that was the big decision. I felt this was really, really important to me. And I made this bold decision to leave him and move from London to New York. So really, in a way, everything that has happened in my life since, you know, my children, my books, the Huffington Post, the fact that I'm here speaking to you today happened because a man wouldn't marry me. I want you to remember that when things go wrong. I say that especially to the young women here who think that a heartbreak is the end of life, and how often it tends to be the beginning of another chapter. So those of us who are much older need to keep reminding the young ones about that. So moving on now from the personal to the professional. I think the most important thing we can do here as women is to redefine what success is. Because very often women have bought the male definition of success, which tends to be work round the clock, drive yourself into the ground, all for the sake of getting to the top of some ladder, some career ladder. But as Sheryl Sandberg said recently, you know, really, we should not think of our careers as kind of a ladder that we go up, but more as a jungle gym. You know, you may make a lateral move. You may see something interesting over there and want to try it. And this really makes our life so much richer and so much more exciting. And also, how do we do that with less stress? Now, less stress isn't just great for work. It's essential for our health. I mean, if you look around, I mean, the statistics are absolutely amazing. Did you know that women in highly stressful jobs have a 40% increased risk of heart disease and heart attacks compared with their less stressed colleagues? Did you know that women have heart attacks almost twice as likely, that who have heart attacks are almost twice as likely as men to die within the year? I don't want to scare you off, but I want to make you realize how important it is to reduce stress in our lives. So, as Nicholas Carr, wrote, there needs to be time for efficient data collection and time for inefficient contemplation. Time to operate the machine and time to sit idly in the garden. We need to create that space in our lives. Unfortunately, technology, as well as being an incredible service to all of us, has also become a bit of a master, the attachment to technology. And the key here, if I had to give you one key to stress reduction, it is very, very simple. It is a 5-letter word called sleep. As some of you may know, I'm a sleep evangelist. I have recently written a post called How to Sleep Your Way to the Top, literally. I profoundly believe that, again, this is something that we women have to lead the way on, because for many men, I'm sorry guys, sleep deprivation has become somehow equated with virility. I don't know why, but I was recently, for example, having dinner with a guy, and he bragged during dinner that he had gotten 4 hours sleep the night before. Now, I didn't say anything, but I thought to myself, you know what? This dinner would have been a lot more interesting if you had gotten 5. And if you look at our world right now, in politics, in media, in business, what we are lacking is not smart leaders. What we are lacking is wisdom. And the way to have wisdom is not just a function of IQ or what degrees you have. It's really a function of how connected are you with your intuition, with your creativity, with your ability to see around the corners. I mean, after all, leadership is about seeing the iceberg before it hits the Titanic and being able to do something about it. I've often thought, for example, that if Lehman Brothers was Lehman Brothers and Sisters, it might still be around today. I always have that image that, maybe while all the Lehman Brothers were kind of working around the clock, trying to sort of get every dollar out of every new derivative they had created, a Lehman sister would have woken up after a blissful 8-hour sleep, had gone to her exercise class, maybe meditated, and seen exactly what the problem was around the corner. Those of you who are creating businesses here know that sometimes your better ideas, your most creative plans don't come when you're exhausted. They don't come when you're operating from your inbox. They may come in the shower. They may come when you're walking up from a nap. And incidentally, big believer in naps. In the Huffington Post newsroom, the first thing I did when we moved to our new offices was I created 2 nap rooms. Now, at the beginning, people were looking at me like, is any journalist going to go into the nap rooms? Well, now you can hardly book one of these nap rooms. We need to start a 3rd one. Of course, I have to say that the other day when I was walking by, I saw 2 people coming out of the nap room. But, my point of view is whatever reduces stress in the middle of the day. Just please do not tell HR. And of course, every woman here has in some way or another experienced what Marlo Thomas talked about women in leadership, which was, she said, if you're a man, to be called ruthless, you have to be Joe McCarthy. If you're a woman, you just have to put somebody on hold. So there is a kind of different standard when it comes to how women are expected to be. And it is our challenge to be able to be effective and productive while at the same time being nurturing. Because as a leader, being able to create a team that is nurtured is something which in the end leads also to great results. And if you look at a lot of those we most admire in our society, you know, whether it's Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, they all write about the time that they give to themselves, whether it was Steve Jobs' Zen meditation or Bill Gates taking a week off every year to go to the cabin in the mountains without devices. And this may seem like a paradox coming from somebody who runs a purely online operation, but trust me, I feel that if we don't learn to disconnect from technology and connect with ourselves, we are really all fried. We see that everywhere. We see it with children. We've launched a new section on the Huffington Post about screens and children. It's in our Under Parents. And many parents, I see many young women here who probably have children, are dealing with the problem of their children's addiction to their iPhones, their iPads. We need to deal with that because that's really what causes a lot of attention deficit issues, a lot of stress issues in children, and it's something which we need to address sooner rather than later. In the same way, there's so much research. In fact, you know, I've actually joined the Harvard School of Medicine Sleep Division. That's how obsessed I'm with the subject. So I read all the latest research about how important it is to disconnect from your screens for at least an hour before you go to sleep. And not to sleep with your devices next to you. Please don't give me the excuse that you need your iPhone in order to wake up in the morning. Pottery Barn, great alarm clock, $32, vintage looking, round, beautiful on your nightstand. The problem is that if you have your iPhone or your BlackBerry, if you're an old-fashioned girl like me, by your bed, you wake up in the middle of the night for whatever reason, and then you are tempted to look at your data. And there is research that shows if you look at your data in the middle of the night, even if you go back to sleep, it's not the same restorative deep sleep. So taking into account all these issues makes an incredible difference at how we tackle our lives. And as we're living through multiple crises at the moment, it's becoming more and more important for us, as well as looking at navigating our personal lives and our professional lives, to see what can be our contribution into changing the world. I stopped at Mass Challenge before I came here, which is this great group of young people who are helping startups get funding, create jobs, and do a great contribution to society. And at HuffPost, this is a huge part of what we're doing. We have launched competitions like our job-raising competition. The Skoll Foundation is contributing $250,000 to the winners, the most interesting not-for-profit creation ideas for jobs. We have a dedicated section that I'd love you all to write for called Opportunity, about new opportunities, new job creation plans, because increasingly we're all recognizing that it's not enough to just wait for Washington or state capitals to solve our problems. We each need to do something ourselves. And in fact, one of the most exciting, I know everybody here is doing something as well as their work and their families, however small, however local. That's really ultimately how we're going to change the world. And I feel that now what is exciting is that we have platforms where we can communicate with each other about all that. For me, that's the most exciting thing about HuffPost. Sure, we are a journalistic enterprise. We won our first Pulitzer. We have over 800 journalists, editors, reporters around the world now. But what excites me the most is that we are a platform, and that anybody who has something of quality to say, whether known or unknown, young or old, has an opportunity to communicate it and reach millions of people. Recently, for example, in our HuffPost teen section, we had a homeless teenager who wrote a beautiful post which happened to be seen by the Harvard admissions office, and they offered her a place at Harvard this year. So that's, for me, what we can do now. And so I want to invite all of you. I know you may be too old to go to Harvard, but I want to invite all of you to send anything that you're interested in, a job idea, a job you're working on, a startup, a charity you're involved in, a tip you have about less stress in your life or more sleep, and send it to me. I'm going to give you my email address so you have no excuse. You can bypass the Huffington Post bureaucracy. It's Arianna, with one R and two N's, at huffingtonpost.com. Really easy, can't forget it. If you forget it, somebody else will remember it. But there is no question that service and giving back are in the zeitgeist, which is a German word, but absolutely true about what is happening. And in the 90s, I wrote a book about that. Don't worry about it. It only sold 3,000 copies, so don't worry if you haven't read it. It was not one of my successes, but it's still one of my favorite books, called The Fourth Instinct. And the theme of it was that we have three instincts that most psychologists and biologists talk about: survival, sex, and power. But there is another instinct, and that is the instinct to find meaning in our lives, the instinct to connect with each other, to make a larger contribution. And that's the instinct which I think is coming to the forefront right now. And that's the instinct that I really believe is going to change the world. And that's why at HuffPost we have a lot of sections, a section called Impact, a section called Good News. It's a great section. If you're depressed about all the bad news in the world, go to that section. It only has good news in any sphere. Because so often those of us in the media tend to focus on what is not working, and we don't put enough of a spotlight on what is working. And there is an awful lot that is working. And it's a little bit, for me, ultimately about a sense of optimism. You know, in science, it's called critical mass. You know, how do we get to a point where there is a fundamental change? In religion, it's called grace. It's how do we do our part, but then something larger is extended to us. Whatever name you want to give it, it's the sense that if enough of us make changing the world in however small a way part of our daily agenda, we are going to get there. Because somehow grace is going to be extended and meet us more than halfway. And as we look at the major problems that we are facing, over 20 million people out of work, foreclosures, not great prospects ahead for job creation, many of our children graduating from college and not being able to get jobs. There are many real, painful problems that we are facing with. But as John Gardner said, very often, some of the biggest breakthrough opportunities that we have are masquerading as insoluble problems. So this is the time to use our skills for innovation, our creativity, all our abilities to come together and solve all these problems. And the only thing I'm really sorry about today is that we don't have an opportunity for a discussion, because coming from the Huffington Post, you know, we just totally believe in interacting. So I hope if you have questions or points you want to make, you can email me about it. Our comments at HuffPost are, for me, one of the most sacred things, giving our readers the ability to speak back. And we just had our 200 millionth comment since we launched, and they're all pre-moderated to avoid the worst aspects of the internet. So that in that conversation, in that communication is where solutions are found. And so I just want to end by saying we can do all that. And we can do all that with more gratitude and more joy and more balance in our lives, and yes, more sleep. Thank you.